All right, let's dive into the book of Genesis. Um, we got a request to take a look at wealth and favor and blessings and how all that plays out in these old stories.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how those themes, prosperity, divine approval, family dynamics, they're not just ancient history, they really resonate across cultures throughout time. Tapping into these kind of fundamental human desires I think we all share.
Okay, so right from the start, Adam and Eve and their sons, Cain and Abel. And the story takes a pretty dark turn right away with Cain's jealousy. He ends up killing his own brother.
Abel, right. And the consequences are severe right away. Cain is cursed to wander the earth, burdened with this guilt and fear. But even in his punishment, there's an element of protection. God marks Cain, and anyone who harms him faces sevenfold vengeance.
Whoa, that's pretty serious. It really shows the value of life, even someone who committed a terrible act.
Yeah, exactly. And it speaks to justice and deterrence in this world that could easily descend into chaos. It's not about condoning revenge. It's about boundaries and upholding this sense of order.
It really makes you think about the ripple effects of our actions and how even in the darkest moments, there can be these unexpected glimmers of protection or even blessing.
And speaking of unexpected outcomes, if you trace Cain's lineage, his descendants actually become known for their skills in city building, music, and metalworking. Innovators, builders, creators.
That's so interesting. It's like from this lineage marked by such a dark act, we see this blossoming of kind of creativity, innovation.
It's a reminder that every family tree, even one rooted in conflict, can bear unexpected fruit. But to understand the flow of blessing like you requested, we have to shift our focus to another lineage, the lineage of Seth.
Seth being Adam and Eve's third son. Right?
Exactly. And it's through Seth's line that we eventually arrive at Noah, and then the central figure in our exploration of blessings, Abraham.
Abraham, the father of many nations, a key player when it comes to understanding divine favor and its connection to wealth and prosperity.
Absolutely. God calls Abraham to leave his homeland, embark on this journey to a new land, promising him unimaginable blessings, descendants as numerous as the stars, a land flowing with milk and honey, and a legacy that will bless all nations.
Wow, that's a promise of extraordinary scale.
And it wasn't just handed to him, it required him to step out in faith, to leave everything familiar, and embrace a path shrouded in uncertainty. It raises questions about trust and risk, and the courage it takes to follow a calling when the destination's not clear.
And what about wealth? Where does material prosperity fit into this picture of divine favor?
Well, Genesis describes Abraham as possessing flocks, herds, silver, and gold. His material wealth seems to increase significantly after he embarks on this journey of faith. It raises that age-old question, is there a connection between following one's calling and experiencing material abundance?
It's a question we still ask today, right? We wonder if aligning ourselves with a higher purpose can lead to greater prosperity, not just spiritually, but materially as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating. But even with all those blessings, Abraham's story isn't without moral complexities. For instance, he passes Sarah off as his sister not once, but twice, to protect himself from threats.
Oh, right, that episode with Pharaoh. Not exactly Abraham's finest moment. It seems like even those favored by God can struggle with fear, make choices that contradict their faith.
Exactly. Human beings, even those deeply connected to the divine, are still subject to human frailties. These stories don't shy away from the messiness of human experience, even within divine favor.
Right, that honesty makes them so relatable even thousands of years later.
Yeah.
We see ourselves in these flawed characters wrestling with the same desires for security and recognition. Now, amidst all this talk of blessing and prosperity, there's a significant element, the covenant of circumcision.
Yeah, that's central to understanding the relationship between Abraham and God. It's this physical marking, a sign of their connection, a reminder of promises made, and the responsibilities that come with those promises.
It makes you think about the power of those rituals and symbols, how they transcend time, connecting people to something larger, a sense of belonging, purpose.
And it's in this context of covenant and promise that things get more complex within Abraham's own family. The story of Hagar and Ishmael introduces another layer to this exploration of favor and lineage and the sometimes unpredictable nature of blessing.
So Hagar is Sarah's Egyptian servant, and she gives birth to Abraham's first son, Ishmael. It's a situation full of tension and heartache. Sarah feels threatened and demands that Hagar and Ishmael be sent away.
It's a story that speaks to family dynamics and jealousy, those difficult choices even within a family chosen and blessed by God. But even in this situation, God doesn't abandon Hagar. He promises her that her son Ishmael will also become the father of a great nation.
It's a reminder that God's blessing can flow through multiple lineages, even in situations that are less than ideal. It challenges our assumptions about who receives favor and how those blessings work out.
It highlights God's compassion for those who feel like outsiders, those who are marginalized or pushed aside. Even in the midst of conflict, there's a glimmer of hope, a promise of future flourishing.
And this theme of God working through the unexpected continues as we move into one of the most challenging passages in Genesis, the binding of Isaac.
This one takes us to the heart of faith, sacrifice, and the often mysterious nature of God's commands. It's resonated throughout history, prompting questions about obedience, trust, and the limits of human understanding.
It's a story that stays with you. The idea of God asking Abraham to sacrifice his son, the son who represents the fulfillment of those extraordinary promises.
It's been interpreted in many ways. Some see it as a test of faith, a demonstration of Abraham's obedience. Others focus on the symbolic significance, seeing it as a foreshadowing of Jesus' sacrifice.
That God himself would make the ultimate sacrifice out of love for humanity. It adds another layer of meaning to Abraham's willingness to offer up Isaac.
And let's not forget the ram caught in the thicket, God's provision at the last moment. It's a powerful reminder that even when things seem impossible, when all hope seems lost, there's always the possibility of a sudden shift, an unexpected intervention.
The Lord will provide. It becomes a source of comfort for people facing seemingly insurmountable challenges. It speaks to that deep human need for reassurance, that even in the darkest moments, we're not alone.
And as we move into the next generation, the saga continues with Jacob and Esau, twin brothers whose rivalry adds another layer to our exploration of inheritance, favor, and family relationships.
Jacob and Esau. Talk about drama. We've got sibling rivalry, parental favoritism, even a wrestling match with God.
It reminds us that even those chosen and blessed by God are not immune to the complexities of human emotion and family dynamics.
So how does Jacob end up getting the blessing that was meant for his older brother Esau?
It's a tale of cunning and deception, orchestrated by Jacob's mother, Rebekah. She tricks her blind husband Isaac into bestowing the blessing upon Jacob, a blessing that traditionally belonged to the firstborn son.
It's a reminder that those who are favored aren't always the most deserving, and that privilege doesn't always align with merit. Human ambition and manipulation intertwined with divine favor.
And Jacob's journey doesn't end there. He has that famous wrestling match with God, an encounter that leaves him with a new name, Israel, meaning he struggles with God.
That name change is powerful. It suggests that faith isn't always about blind obedience or passive acceptance. It can involve questioning, wrestling, even challenging God as part of a deeper spiritual journey.
It's a more nuanced understanding of faith. It acknowledges the doubts and struggles that can accompany belief. And this theme of grappling with faith, seeking understanding amidst complexity, continues as we look at Jacob's wives, Leah and Rachel.
More sibling rivalry, more favoritism, and God intervening in ways that defy human expectations.
Leah, considered less desirable, is given the gift of fertility, while Rachel, Jacob's true love, remains barren for years. God's plan unfolding in ways that challenge our assumptions about who receives blessings and how.
Definitely not your typical fairy tale ending. And this theme of unexpected blessings continues as Jacob bestows his own blessings upon his sons, giving a double portion to Joseph, the son of his beloved Rachel.
It's a reminder that family dynamics, even in those chosen and blessed by God, are rarely straightforward. Favoritism, rivalry, and unexpected turns of fate are woven into these ancient tales.
It really makes you wonder, how do we reconcile divine favor with the complexities of human behavior, the messy realities of family, and the unpredictable nature of life?
Those are questions that have resonated throughout history. They still challenge us today as we grapple with our own desires for wealth, security, and purpose in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable. Welcome back to our deep dive into Genesis. Last time we were talking about Jacob blessing his sons, and that sets the stage for Joseph's story.
Yeah, talk about a wild ride. Betrayal, prison, dreams, famine, forgiveness. This story has it all, and it really digs into how wealth, favor, and blessings can be gained and lost in some pretty unexpected ways.
It really does. And it all starts with something that seems pretty small. That fancy robe Jacob gives to Joseph, as a sign of his favoritism. But that one act sets off this chain of events with huge consequences.
I can only imagine how Joseph's brothers felt, seeing their dad's clear preference. That kind of favoritism can lead to resentment and jealousy, even in families that are otherwise loving, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't just the robe. Remember, Joseph had those crazy dreams where he saw his brothers bowing down to him? Imagine sharing those with your siblings when they're already feeling envious.
Yeah, like pouring gasoline on a fire. It's no wonder they wanted to get rid of him.
Their first thought was to kill him. But in the end, they decided to sell him into slavery instead. It's a dark reminder of what humans are capable of. How jealousy and greed can lead to real cruelty.
And even in that betrayal, there's this cold, calculating element. They sell their own brother for 20 pieces of silver. They actually profit from his misfortune.
It shows that even within a family, the desire for wealth and power can completely override what's right and wrong.
So Joseph ends up in Egypt, far from home, no family, no freedom. But even then, it seems like that theme of favor pops up again.
Right. He's bought by Potiphar, an official of Pharaoh, and he quickly rises in Potiphar's house. The text says, "The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered." It's like his connection to God is helping him through even the toughest times.
It makes you think about whether those who are truly favored have something special, like a resilience or maybe a wisdom that helps them do well even when things are bad.
That's a really interesting thought. But just when things seem to be getting better for him, his life takes another crazy turn. Potiphar's wife enters the picture.
Oh yeah, the classic story of temptation and false accusations.
Yeah.
She tries to seduce Joseph, and when he says no, she accuses him of attacking her.
It shows that even when you're trying to live a good life, you can get caught up in situations that can really damage your reputation and freedom.
And in Joseph's case, it lands him in prison, falsely accused. It seems like every time he gets a little bit of hope, something bad happens.
You're right, but even in prison, it seems like God is still with him. He gains the trust of the warden and is put in charge of the other prisoners. He has this natural ability to lead, to manage, to create order, even in chaos.
It's in prison that he meets those two officials of Pharaoh, the cupbearer and the baker. And they both have these dreams that are bothering them. And Joseph, with his gift for interpreting dreams, offers to help.
And his interpretations are spot on. The cupbearer will be released and get his job back, but the baker, well, his dream means something much worse.
It's like those dreams, those glimpses into the future, are turning points in Joseph's life. They show his ability to understand hidden meanings. And this ability will eventually lead him to the biggest opportunity he'll ever have.
2 years pass, and Pharaoh himself starts having vivid dreams, and none of his advisors can figure out what they mean.
That's when the cupbearer remembers Joseph, the guy in prison who got his dream right. He tells Pharaoh about Joseph's gift, and Pharaoh has Joseph brought to the palace.
It's like all those years of hardship, the betrayal and imprisonment were all leading up to this moment. Joseph, who was cast aside and falsely accused, is now standing in front of the most powerful man in Egypt.
And he doesn't just explain Pharaoh's dreams. He also tells Pharaoh how Egypt can prepare for the years of famine that are coming.
His wisdom and his ability to see the future impress Pharaoh so much that he makes Joseph second in command over all of Egypt. What a change.
All those years of struggle and suffering were like a test, getting him ready for this huge responsibility.
And from this position of power, Joseph is able to store grain during the good years, so Egypt will have enough food to survive the famine.
It's a great example of using wealth and power the right way. Not for personal gain, but to help an entire nation. He becomes a symbol of hope and provision when things are really tough.
And then the famine hits. And it's not just in Egypt, it's in all the surrounding lands. People come from everywhere, including Joseph's own brothers, looking for food.
And that's when things get really interesting. The brothers, desperate for food, arrive in Egypt and bow down to this powerful Egyptian official who controls the food supply. They have no idea who he is. But we, the audience, know. They're bowing down to their own brother, Joseph.
What a twist. It's like the story has come full circle, but now Joseph is the one with all the power.
I bet Joseph was feeling all kinds of things. Anger, hurt, maybe even a little satisfaction.
He doesn't tell them who he is right away. He tests them, accuses them of being spies, even throws one of them in jail to see how they react.
He needs to know if they've changed, if they're truly sorry for what they did. He's not just looking for an apology. He wants to see real change.
And finally, he sees it. He sees that they regret what they did, that they're loyal to their younger brother, Benjamin. And that's when he can't hold back any longer. He tells them who he is. It's a really powerful moment.
When he says, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" It's so intense. You can feel all those years of being apart and all the pain.
It shows the power of family and the possibility of forgiveness, even after the worst kind of betrayal.
And what's amazing is that Joseph doesn't just forgive them. He takes care of them and their whole family. He brings them to Egypt, gives them the best land, and makes sure they'll survive and do well.
It shows how wise and compassionate he is. He realizes that everything he went through, all the ups and downs, were part of a bigger plan to save his family and a lot of other people from starving. His story shows how God can work through really hard times to bring about something good.
Back again for our deep dive into Genesis. We've been from the Garden of Eden to the palaces of Egypt. We've seen how wealth, favor, and blessings play a part in these ancient stories.
Yeah, quite a journey. Jealousy, betrayal, famine, family drama, we've seen it all. But also amazing stories of resilience, forgiveness, and moments where God's plan shines through even in the chaos.
It's like a tapestry woven with both darkness and light. We see how complex humans are and the surprising ways God interacts with us. But as we reach the final chapters of Genesis, things shift a bit, right? We move from individual stories like Abraham and Joseph to the formation of a whole people, the Israelites.
Exactly. It's less about personal destinies and more about laying the groundwork for a nation, a people who will carry these stories and their meanings forward.
So how does this shift from individual to collective actually happen?
Jacob, who's now known as Israel, plays a big role. He had 12 sons, and they become the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Oh yeah, the 12 tribes. It's like we're zooming out, seeing this national identity emerge, a people with a shared history and a destiny. What happens to Joseph's family after he brings them to Egypt? Do they keep their own identity, or do they blend in with the Egyptians?
They make their home in Goshen, a fertile area good for their flocks and herds. And they really thrive there, growing in number and prosperity under Joseph's care. It's interesting how their success seems to mirror Egypt's abundance during that time.
It makes you think about the importance of environment, how a supportive context can help people flourish. But it also makes you wonder about assimilation. How do you hold on to your unique identity when you're surrounded by a larger, more dominant culture?
That's a crucial tension throughout the story of the Israelites. They're chosen, set apart, but they're also meant to live in the world, interact with other cultures, and those interactions, as we see in Genesis, aren't always easy.
Right. There are times of conflict, misunderstandings, even exploitation. How does this theme of wealth and power play out in this shift from family to nation?
Well, Joseph, with his smarts and skills, basically saves Egypt from economic ruin during the famine. He becomes Pharaoh's trusted advisor. He shows that wealth and power can be used for good, not just personal gain, but for the good of a whole nation.
What an example of leadership, using your abilities and resources to help others in a big way. It reminds us that people with wealth and power have a responsibility to use those gifts wisely, to create systems that are fair and benefit everyone.
But even with good intentions, you can have unintended consequences. Remember how Joseph, during the famine, buys up all the land for Pharaoh? It consolidated power, but it also created a system where the people were dependent on the ruler.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. He was ensuring the survival of the nation during a crisis, but he was also creating a system that could be abused. A system where a few people have all the power.
It shows that even the best actions can have unexpected consequences. And as we see later in the Bible, this centralized power eventually leads to the Israelites becoming slaves in Egypt, which sets up the story of the Exodus.
So those seemingly isolated events in Genesis are connected to a much bigger story, a story that plays out over generations. It's like those seeds of blessing and conflict are planted in Egypt, waiting to grow in unexpected ways.
Exactly. And before we finish up with Genesis, let's go back to that scene at the end where Jacob, on his deathbed, blesses each of his sons.
Those blessings are so full of symbolism and foreshadowing. They speak to the unique character and destiny of each tribe, hinting at their strengths and weaknesses.
It's like Jacob, with his last words, is tying together their past, present, and future. He acknowledges their individual identities, but he also stresses their shared heritage, their connection as a people. He's passing on a legacy that's both a gift and a challenge, a call to live up to the promises made to their ancestors.
And there's that powerful image of Joseph promising to bury his father in Canaan, the promised land.
Right. Even though they found success in a home in Egypt, their true destiny lies somewhere else. Genesis ends not with a sense of closure, but with a feeling of anticipation, a yearning for a homeland that's still waiting.
It leaves us with a sense that the story isn't over, that the journey continues in the books that come after. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Genesis, what are some key takeaways? Why should we, today, care about these old stories of wealth, favor, and family drama.
These stories, even though they're ancient, still speak to our deepest desires: security, significance, connection. They make us think about wealth and power, the struggles in our families, and the mystery of how God works in the world, often in ways we don't expect.
They remind us that even those chosen by God are just human. They can be kind, but they can also make big mistakes. And they give us hope. Even in the darkest times, something good can come out of it. Something that can bless individuals and whole nations for generations.
As we close our deep dive, I wonder what stands out most to you. What insights will you take from these ancient tales into your own life and how you see the world?
Thanks for joining us on this epic journey through Genesis. We hope you found some wisdom and maybe even some aha moments along the way. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.